Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Welsley Hunko from Little Literacy Nook. Welsley is a literacy coach out in Georgia. She's also a mom of two and has lots of experience in education, specifically teaching kids how to read. In this conversation, Welsley and I talk a lot about how she supports families online through her Instagram, Little Literacy Nook, and also through her work with LovEvery. And she wrote a book called Teach Me to Read, which is available on Amazon. I love this conversation with Welsley because you can really see her heart and her passion for helping students learn how to read, especially since as a child, Welsley herself struggled, and it's only now in her adult years that she realized that she has dyslexia. If you have any questions about this episode or anything else that I share, please feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on Instagram at Little's Love Learning Blog. You can also reach out to Welsley. She's on Instagram at Little Literacy Nook. Hey, Welsley, thank you so much for being on the Little's Love Learning podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm very honored to be here today.
You are so sweet. Well, I was just chatting with you a moment ago, just saying I stumbled across your Instagram account a long time ago, and it has so blown up. It's amazing to see how many follows you have and how many families you're helping with all of your resources. So I can't wait to talk about all of that and Little Literacy Nook. But before we do that, let's jump back and talk about how you even got into education in the first place.
Okay, so this is my 13th year, I think, in education. And I think the moment I walked into kindergarten, I knew that it was the dream job for me. I've always wanted to be a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher. My mom was a teacher for a while. Both of my aunts were teachers, so maybe it's in my blood. But just something about it, I just loved. I just fell in love with, so many of my teachers, and it just seemed like the greatest job in the world. So when I went to college, I went straight into College of Education, and then from there, I realized, wow, this is a really hard job. It is not as easy as it looks when you're the student in school. But I've just always loved working with kids and, just the magic of seeing kids grow and learn. It's very fulfilling to me. So anyway, I went to University of Georgia, and then I taught in Athens for a little while after graduating, and then moved to the Atlanta area. Most of my teaching experience has surprisingly been in third grade, because I feel like the thing I enjoy most is working with the younger kids, that kindergarten, first, second age group. But I just kind of got into third grade classroom as my first year, and went, you kind of get stuck in education sometimes in the same
Yeah.
grade level. And then I moved schools and did ESOL for a couple of years. And then this literacy coach position became available. So my district decided to take the COVID relief money that all public school districts received and use it to really revamp reading in our district. So all of the teachers are getting letters trained or have gotten letters trained. And then they put a literacy coach in every elementary. And so it kind of just happened. It wasn't really on my radar. But I was approached and asked if I would be interested in it. And I was like, oh, no, I don't want to leave the classroom. I want to work with kids. And then my principal told me that it would be 50% intervention and then 50% literacy coach. And it would only be focused kindergarten through second grade. And I was like, okay,
That's
I'll look
perfect.
into it. And so it's been a really fun journey. I feel like out of all my years in education, this is the most growth I've ever made, the most learning I've done. And so it's been really fun.
That's so much fun. And nice that you had that third grade experience because now you
Mhm.
know where the holes are in K to
Yes,
2 reading education because I'm sure you saw your third graders struggling in certain areas. So you can go back and make sure that your students you're working with
Mhm.
now aren't going to struggle in that same way.
Right, right.
So let's talk about Little Literacy Nook. What inspired you to start your Instagram account and your business, and how did that all come about?
It's just so crazy. Yeah, I never expected it to be what it is. So when I got the literacy coach position, I remember sitting in on a couple of parent teacher conferences and then also just chatting with some of my friends who at the time I had a 2-year old when I first started this position. And so a lot of my friends had toddlers, and just hearing some of their conversations and then sitting in on parent teacher conferences, I realized like, wow, parents all this stuff that I am learning during letters training, parents have no idea because I'm a teacher. I've been teaching at that point for 10 years, and this is stuff I didn't know. And it was like somebody has got, like, I've got to share this message. I want to help parents. I want parents to know, because there were so many parents who came in for conferences or SST, like RTI, response to intervention meetings. And it just struck me how like helpless they were and how much they needed somebody to guide them. And I just wanted to be like, let me just sit and talk to you for an hour and tell you everything to do to help your child. And so I created Little Literacy Nook, the Instagram account, and I was like, I'll just like post some videos and things for parents at my school. And then one video, it was the cat kite CK
Oh,
spelling rule,
yes.
went viral. And I was like, oh, I went from like 200 to 60,000 followers in a day.
Oh
And I was
my
like,
gosh.
I don't even know what to do. Like I
In
am
a
not
day?
at
Whoa.
that point, I didn't even know I had message requests on Instagram. Like that's how clueless I was about Instagram and how it all worked. Like I knew nothing. And all of a sudden I was like, huh, what's this tab? And it was message requests. And I was like, there's a lot of people in here wanting help. And so I really like, and I still feel like I'm pretty clueless. I just think of things. I'm like, if I taught it in my small group that day or had a conversation with a parent, I'm like, oh, other parents might want to hear this. I'll make a video on it. And so there is no rhyme or reason or intentionality behind a lot of it. It's just like, oh, if this will help parents, I'm going to post it on here. And my mission with that really was truly to give parents support because oh, gosh, tutoring is like an arm and a leg. And I just feel like it's just not fair that if your child is struggling in reading and you don't have $70 an hour to shell out for a reading tutor and they're not getting the instruction that they're supposed to get in school, like that's awful, you know? And so
Yeah.
that's my driving factor. I struggled as a reader growing up through Orton Gillingham training and letters training. I realized that I myself was dyslexic. I
Wow.
always wondered why reading was so hard for me. And so I think that's a huge connection. I don't want any child to feel the way that I felt during reading, and I don't want any parent to not know how to help their child with what they need help with in reading, you know?
That's so beautiful, though, that you're taking that struggle that you had and trying to turn around and help other kids and other families so that they don't have that same struggle. I know that it can stay with you as an adult. My husband really
Mhm.
struggled learning how to read, and it wasn't until end of second grade that he was diagnosed with his learning disability. And that still sticks with him, that
Mhm.
feeling of not understanding what everybody else is doing and how other people are looking at you. It's a hard situation to be in. So you're trying so
Mhm.
hard to prevent that for other kids and to make sure that they feel supported and know that it's okay if it's hard, but we can do hard things and we can get through it and we can absolutely learn to read. And it's so wonderful what you're doing.
Thank you.
So, talk about your book. You wrote a book that is for sale on Amazon, right?
Yes.
Let's hear
Yeah,
all about that.
it's called Teach Me to Read. Another thing that it was like I think someone asked me like, "Oh my gosh, have you always dreamed of writing a book?" And I said, "No, never. Like I never. I'm dyslexic. Like writing a book is not in my cards." Um, but Teach Me to Read, so a publishing company reached out to me through Instagram, and they're a wonderful company, Modern Kid Press. They make a lot of just beautiful, engaging workbooks and activity books for kids. And they just said they wanted to get into this market of educational materials and wanted to know if I'd be interested in writing like a book that was like kind of like a start here for reading book. And so we drafted through it, and the first draft was more of like a learn your letter sounds book. And as we looked at it, I was like, well, this is what I would do for the second book. And then we kind of combined those two ideas into this one. So it really progresses letter by letter. And as children learn each letter, it's very systematic, it's very structured. So in the book, I was very diligent and thorough with making sure that they would never see a word for a letter sound they hadn't learned yet. So it was very structured and sequential. And so it's been a fun process to write that, and just hearing how many families are getting it and working through it and just like, oh my gosh, it makes it so clear. Like, this is exactly what I say. This is, now that my kid can read these words, they're picking up other words. And so it's really that foundational piece that that I think a lot of parents were missing, because I think a lot of a lot of parents have been told that if you read to your child a lot, they'll pick it up. Um, or if you show them a few things here and there, or memorize this list of 200 sight words, then they'll be fine in reading. They just keep climbing the levels, and that's really just not how it works. And so I'm excited that this book is out there, and it's just a step-by-step foundation for parents, and it's quick, and you can do these little lessons. And really, when they're little like that, they don't need a whole lot. Like, their brain kind of absorbs it quickly, like little sponges. So yeah, it's
That's,
fun.
that's so helpful, just that step-by-step sequential progression.
Mhm.
I was
Mhm.
talking to a friend recently, and she's a kindergartner, and he couldn't read a two-letter word. And she was like, I was so confused. Why can't he read this two-letter word? Well, if the word is he, they're not going to be able to read he right away because they've learned the short vowel E, not the long vowel
Exactly.
E, and not open syllables. So, but for parents, they don't see the complication of the phonics skills. They might just look at how long the word is. How many letters are in
Exactly.
this word? And it's not, kids can read longer words. If it were to be a compound word with two closed syllables, they would be able
Yes.
to read that word, but they're not able to read a shorter word that has more complex phonics patterns. So little things like that, which of course
Hmm.
parents wouldn't know to think about if they're not in
Right.
education, you can walk them through step by step, which is so helpful.
Yes. It's really hard to understand how hard it is to learn to read when you can already read. Like, you can't
Right.
remove that knowledge from your brain. And so then to try to work back and understand like why your child can't read this certain word, it's very hard because it's already ingrained in parents' brains. So it is yeah, understanding word size versus word skills is very different.
Very different. I love the way you put that exactly. And so the last area that you're working in is working with LovEvery for their new reading program. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, the reading skill set. Oh my gosh, it's so amazing. I've had to turn down a few people who have reached out with products. And when Love Every reached out, I was like, I vet everything. I don't want to promote this or do anything with it unless I can see some of the work behind it. And when I looked at it, I was like, you took everything that I've preached on Instagram for the last however many years I've been doing it and turn it into a beautiful product. Like, this is
Yay!
amazing. It really is. The reading skill set, they had a ton of researchers and everyone that you would need to make sure that it followed the right format for teaching reading. It's all play-based learning, which is beautiful. So every skill that the children are learning, they play a game with it first, and then there's a decodable reader to go along with it. And so it is just like, it's so fun and engaging for kids. And so now my initial role when they reached out to me was I just helped film some of the videos that go along with the product, explaining some of the product pieces. But now LovEvery has an app, and parents can send in their questions on the app. And so now if you ask a question about reading, I'm the expert who's answering it for you.
Oh,
So that has been really fun. And I've already learned a lot there too, because some parents send in questions and I'm like, oh, this is something I have to research a little bit. And I love that it keeps my brain challenged and keeps me learning more about literacy and how kids learn to read and everything. So yeah, Love Every, it's a phenomenal it's a phenomenal company, and the reading skill set, it's the best product on the market for reading, if
wow.
you have to ask me. It's awesome. It's really great.
It's so beautiful and all play-based. I'll definitely link it down below. And I saw that Spencer from Toddlers Can Read also
Yes.
works with LovEvery. And I know that the two of you have collaborated before.
Yeah, we didn't know. So we both had to sign NDAs, right? And so when I found out he was the director, was like around the same time that I was able to say that I was working with him. I was like, wait, what? What? Oh my
Oh,
gosh,
that's
this is
so
so
funny.
cool. So yeah, I know. He and I actually, we haven't had worked together much at Love Every, interestingly, since we've both started, but it is cool that we're both tied to it.
Well, it's nice to know that there are experts behind it because sometimes
Yes.
with companies, they want to put out a product, kind of capitalize on the trend. They see science of reading and they're like, yes, we're
Mhm.
going to put out a product, make money. and the products are not great. You can go into any
Right.
Barnes and Noble and find lots of books that
Oh,
are made by
so
companies that are
many.
not great. Yes.
Oh, it drives me crazy. I go to the Target dollar spot and I'm like, don't buy these cards. Don't.
I know if I see one more, I for ice cream when they're in
Yes,
preschool or talking about G
right.
for giraffe, it's so important that parents understand that those companies are not always doing the best for kids. They're trying to make money. And it's so nice to know that LovEvery has experts that know what they're talking about.
Oh,
So it's
yeah.
actually going to be sound educational knowledge.
It definitely is. The research that went into it is like very deep and very thorough.
That's amazing. So, we've been talking about the importance of systematic and structured reading instruction, but let's talk a little bit about what that actually is, structured
Mhm.
literacy, and how it is different from what was taught before, balanced literacy. A lot of the listeners of this podcast are parents, but we have lots of teachers as well. But I think just having that overview will be really helpful for them to understand why it's important to understand how your child is being taught to read.
Absolutely. Okay, so balance literacy um, is rooted a little bit more in something called whole language. So it's teaching kids some strategies for reading and then having them memorize kind of whole words so that when they see those words in other books or other, places, they recognize patterns and that kind of thing. It was based on a leveling system. So your child starts at a level A and then they go up to B, C, D. And kids ideally would progress through this leveling system and start to learn to read. The more that they read, the more they see reading. And I think the thing that people hold on to with balanced literacy is it's about building a love of literacy. So really exposing your children to books and having them create your cute, cozy reading nook, and all those things kind of came along with the movement of balanced literacy. And none of that is bad in certain instances, but structured literacy is making sure that our students learn to read the way the brain is designed to read. So, following a sequential, so it goes in order, it picks up new skills over time, and systematic phonics. So they're kind of applying the same routines to learning the phonics skills. And that way, can't remember. You might know the percentage of words that are actually decodable in the
Oh,
English language. Like they're
it's
not
very
that
small
many
percentage. Yeah.
irregular, right? And so when kids learn all their phonics patterns, they're able to apply and sound out words instead of just guessing words. A huge problem with balanced literacy is we taught a lot of guessing strategies. So look at the word, check the picture. Well, that works great until about third grade when the pictures go away. Or, look at the first few letters and try to sound out the rest of the word, then read the rest of the sentence and go back. Does that word make sense there? And that's just not, especially for students who might have any kind of reading challenge or dyslexia, that is not how they're going to learn to read and how they're going to master reading. And so structured literacy, one of the myths is that, oh, we're just teaching phonics, and that's not true. Structured literacy is about doing developmentally appropriate activities for your age level. So in kindergarten, they're going to be working on mastering those letter sounds. They're going to be working on, fine motor skills and handwriting and really those foundational skills while also working on their oral language comprehension. So that's the piece that is important that I think people sweep over with structured literacy is that in structured literacy, it doesn't mean you never read a picture book and you never talk about characters and setting and story elements, but you're doing those things through conversation and through talking while kids learn to read. And then around, in second grade, they're learning, they have enough reading skills to be able to read more on their own. So they're starting to pick up some of that reading comprehension skill versus it just being oral language comprehension. So we build all those things in through reading comprehension, through a teacher reading aloud and talking with their class.
I think that's a good point that gets swept over, or maybe
Mhm.
people think it's not as important, the oral language and the language comprehension piece. And I wonder if it's just because it's not as tangible to check off the list, right? Or
Right.
to measure. Because I remember when I was teaching many moons ago in first grade before I had my first daughter, we had the sight word list and you would check
Mhm.
off where each student was and you'd send them home with the next sight word list. And I think for us, we felt very organized. We felt like we were doing the right thing, that we were
Mhm.
sending them to the next level. Whereas, which, spoiler alert, that was not the right thing. Now we know that that's not how the brain learns to read. But again, with that oral language development, you can't see it in the same way. You can't track it in the
Exactly.
same way, but it's so
Yeah.
crucial. It's so important.
Right. It is so important. And you made a good point with the leveling system, like checking it off and moving. It feels good to go from an A
Right.
to a B to a C to a D book. But I almost wish now there was like a leveling system that was like level A, vowel sounds, level
Yes.
B, like CVC words, level C, and a progression. So now I think parents have to retrain their brains to think through the levels. Okay, do we have our letter sounds down? Good. Can we blend three-letter words, a consonant, vowel, consonant word? Okay, next, can we read words with digraphs and blends? Kind of progressing through the levels, so to speak, that way instead of these lettered levels of books.
Absolutely. That makes sense. Total sense that parents are not familiar with that yet. And the other thing I wanted to touch on when you were talking about reading aloud books to your child and in the classroom
Mhm.
reading aloud, it's so important. And it's so important to know that those books are not designed for kids to read. Because I think that's part of
Yes.
it too. Parents just don't know. They go to the children's section and they think a children's book is meant for a child to read. And that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact,
Right.
I was reading a study where children's books have more advanced vocabulary than even adults use in their daily language. So
Yes, they
many of
do.
those books have amazing vocabulary, but no child is that is, kindergarten, first, second grade is going to be decoding those words yet. So just knowing that different types of books have different purposes.
Exactly. And even the like I can read books, that have the little like I can read level one, I can read level two, like those are also, my sister just sent me a picture because her daughter is really picking up with reading and she was like, "Are these good books to you?" I said, "No, please don't
No.
use the I can read books. Let me get the Charge Mommy books instead."
Yes, I love the Charge Mommy
The
books.
decodable readers instead. And so just making that shift. But you think, okay, I see this book in the library. It says I can read level one. My child's in first grade. Like, oh, that's a correlation there. And some kids will be able to read that by first grade, but those, they're not all decodable words. There's going to be a lot of word patterns in there that your child has not learned yet, unless they've been exposed to those particular words that happen to be in that book. So it's
Right. And
tricky.
we need libraries to carry decodable
Oh
books.
my
In
gosh.
fact, one of
Yeah.
the reels that I had that went a little bit more viral, I just had more views on it, was me showing a video of our library shelf with all of the leveled readers, the I Can Read books. And then I zoom into this one decodable Bob book at the bottom. It's like one tiny decodable Bob book. And all the rest were those leveled readers. And
Yeah.
I was saying in that reel, I just wish we could get more libraries on board with decodable books. It's such a short time that kids are going to be reading those decodable books. We
It really
want to
is.
get them out, but not all families have the ability to purchase these sets. And you'll purchase a set, but then you're like, I need the next set or I need more. We just need
Yes.
more opportunities for them to read the decodable books. And so I would
Hmm.
love to have a push for libraries to carry them and to organize them in a way that parents would know. My child is working on this skill. I can choose from these decodable books. So maybe
Hmm.
one day.
Okay, you and I are going to start a movement. It's going to be like
Yes,
the library decodable movement. We're
we
going to get
need
them in every library in the nation.
it would make such a difference. We're going to do
Yeah.
it.
I will say it is good that, when I first started in this position 4 years ago, the only thing I could really recommend to parents was Bob books. And now I have so many more. My recommendation list has grown so much. And so publishers, in a good way, have caught wind that we're moving toward this and have started producing. We just have to be careful because I bought my son or my husband, I would never have bought these. My sweet husband thought he was doing so well. He bought our son the Spider-Man. They were like Spider-Man phonics books, is what they were
Oh,
labeled. And it was the same ones as the I Can Read book, and they just highlighted one particular vowel sound that was maybe seen like three times throughout the book.
oh
And I was
my
like,
goodness.
no,
No.
we can't do this is garbage. Good job,
Oh
though. Good
no.
job, Spider-Man. Good try.
Yes, because parents just trust the companies that they are putting out good things. So we just have to
Yeah.
be more careful. So you have your own kids, and one is in kindergarten this year. Is that right?
Yes, I have a kindergartner. Uh-huh.
So that's super fun for you to see now. how he is learning how to read, and also as a working mom, how to help him at home after working all day with your own job and then coming home and now you have to be in that mom role. So, can you give maybe some tips or advice for other parents of kindergartners who are learning to read?
For sure. And I have a 2-year-old also. And so,
Wow.
y'all, I feel you, the working at home. Oh my gosh. Because we get home in the afternoon and it's like my 2-year-old is in the dumping things out phase. So he's like making a huge mess. It's really hard. Luckily, our kindergarten teacher sends home a decodable passage every week. And I told a friend the other day, I was like, I'm so glad she does that because otherwise it's on me to like say, let's pick a decodable book and sit down and read it. And I just here I am running an Instagram that's all about promoting reading, and it's just so hard to do in the afternoons
Yeah.
after school. You're trying to get dinner ready, get packed up for school the next day. Like we're out the door at 6:40 in the morning. My husband teaches too, so it's just chaos. But one thing I'll say is I'm so glad that I put in the time and effort starting when he was like 2.5, 3 to really build that strong foundation because now the reading is coming really easily to him. And so I don't really have to work with him much at home. We will do, I mean, he's worked through a lot of my book with me, but he was kind of, by the time the book came out, he was a little beyond that level. But he will read some decodable readers. We play a lot of games. I can always trick him into playing a game with me. That has to do with reading. Thank goodness LovEvery for that because he's obsessed with all the LovEvery games. But as a parent, it's hard. And so the thing that worked really well for us in our busy schedule was finding the little teachable moments in your everyday routines. And so we would do a lot of word play in our drive home in the car. I would say, okay, I want you to put this mystery word together. Ig. And he would, sound it out and say pig. And so really building that phonological. And so he's not looking at letters at that time. We're just really working on the sounds and blending those sounds. And that does so much to prime your child's brain for reading. I think parents don't realize like how much that piece is important of building their sound knowledge even without the letters present. And then we just did so much that was playing with letters. I would have him drive his cars over little letter cards and tell me the sounds or in the bath. Oh my gosh, that's one of the best times. We get the foam letters and we'll like pick a few and go through them. Almost like you would drill with flashcards, but it's more fun because it's in the bath. And so finding those little moments and my son has a ton of energy, so it's really hard to get him to sit down and read with me. But another routine we did is we do our bedtime stories every night. And so I would have him either like read a word that I knew he knew the sounds of in the bedtime story. So I'd read the whole sentence and be like, okay, you sound out this word. I know you can do this one just to get that little practice in. Or I'd say, you read me a decodable book first, and then I'm going to read you 2 picture books. And so that kind of fit into our routine. So it is hard. And I feel for the parents who really have children who struggle with reading, because I know that as a parent, you don't have time at the end of the school day to sit down and work with them like that. And so it's a challenge for sure. But games and building it into your routine is my best advice.
Yes, absolutely. And the sound games, I talk about that all the time. I really
Mhm.
think that phonemic awareness piece is so crucial because it really makes things easier down the road. And I just love how you pointed out it's really that prevention over intervention. Like we're
Yes.
preventing any reading problems by setting them up for a strong foundation in those early years, like you did with your son, so that it can build upon itself when they get to kindergarten and first grade.
Mhm. And one of the hardest gaps, so, the more I've looked at this, if your school is doing, um, the school your children go to is doing structured literacy and they have a phonics program, then your child is going to learn that phonics there. The thing that we're seeing now that we're in our 3rd year of implementing a phonics program at my school is the gap that's hard to close is that vocabulary gap. And so, we get the kids here, we're teaching them their letter sounds, we're teaching them structured phonics, like they are getting it and they are becoming good readers. They can lift the words off the page, they're becoming better spellers. But if they don't have that vocabulary foundation from home, then that is so much harder to close that gap than to fill in those phonics skills. And so reading with your child every night and reading those picture books, like you mentioned, the vocabulary in picture books is phenomenal. That does so much for their foundation as well.
That's such good advice. And it's fun. It's super fun to get
It's
to do
so
that with
fun.
your little one. And I always would read to my kids when they were eating. If we had a slower morning, I could do it during breakfast. When my son was home, he was home for preschool his 3-year-old year. So we would do a lot of this fun things at lunch, but it's because they were contained. Sitting at the
Right.
table, they weren't off. Like you said, your son has so much energy. So if you can find a moment when they're contained or when they're in the car, of course, not reading to
Mhm.
them if you're driving, but you can still play those sound games.
Yeah.
Anytime they're contained, it's helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, interesting that you yourself now recognize that you have dyslexia. It's so nice that you see your son picking up reading so easily because we know
Mhm.
that dyslexia is oftentimes passed through families, parents, down to kids. So, if you could just talk a little bit about dyslexia and maybe some of the red flags that parents might want to watch out for, especially if they struggled with reading growing up, or they
Mhm.
had a parent who did, or an uncle, and now they're seeing maybe some signs in their child that they're worried about, I think that would be helpful.
Absolutely. And like you said, early intervention is just so important. I've talked about this before that I don't know, maybe my son is dyslexic since I am and it's so genetic, but I probably will never know because he hasn't had the opportunity to not have his brain rewired the right
Yeah,
way. But anyway,
great
okay.
point.
So some signs of dyslexia, starting in pre-K, if your child has a lot of trouble with what we were talking about earlier, that phonological awareness. So being able to rhyme words, or, if you've repeated a rhyme over and over again and then you leave a word out and they really struggle to come up with that word to complete a rhyme, that's one of our earliest signs. And then other phonology, being able to like kind of put two syllables together to make a word orally, not even looking at the letter sounds. By kindergarten, rapid net letter naming and learning their letter sounds. So if you're getting to mid kindergarten and they are just really still struggling with matching letter names, letter sounds, and doing it really fluently, then that can be one of your signs there. First grade, if they are struggling with blending quickly and automatically those 3-letter words, and even by mid first grade those four or 5-letter words, if they're just really looking at the same word over and over again, sounding it out and not stringing it together to fluently read that word automatically, that can be one of your signs. And then by second grade and up, if they're reading out loud, and same with first grade, every word they're having to stop and sound out, and they're just really laboring over their reading. It's taking them forever to get through a sentence that, another child might be able to read fluently within a few seconds. Then those are some of your telltale signs of dyslexia.
I think that's such good advice for parents to just watch out for that. It doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily mean if your child is struggling that they are going to be diagnosed with dyslexia, but just be curious, keep it in your mind, keep it in your back
Mhm.
pocket, and think, oh, I wonder why this is a struggle for them. And never feel bad about reaching out to your child's teacher and advocating for them to have a child study done on your child, to maybe be tested, whatever you feel like is best for your child, because
Mhm.
teachers don't always reach out to parents in the fastest manner. If a child is struggling, maybe they want to give
Mhm.
them time, but we know now that wait and see is not an approach that we want to take. So if you have an inkling in your parent gut thinking something might not be right, definitely reach out and see because you want to get that early intervention.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so interesting how you said you might never know if your son is dyslexic because he never had the opportunity to go through balanced literacy. He's
Right,
always
right.
been
He
taught
never
in
had
the
the
appropriate
opportunity to
way.
get failed by the school
Yes.
system.
It's so true. A lot of kids who struggle with reading, had they been taught correctly, would not be
Mhm.
struggling with reading. So we
Mhm.
just need to make sure we're teaching them correctly.
Absolutely.
Well, Wellesley, I have loved this conversation. This has been so much fun. I think you are such a bright light on Instagram. I love that you said you really don't have a strategy behind it because it feels so authentic. It doesn't feel fake or phony or that you're trying to do something I don't know. It's just very real and authentic. And I just appreciate that so much.
Thank you.
If
Thank you.
you could give listeners one takeaway from this episode, what would it be?
Definitely you are your child's first teacher. You get to see them from birth. Every teacher only gets to spend one class year with them. And so you get to see their progression of development from birth all the way through their whole life. And so if you noticed that your child is struggling with reading, don't wait until third grade, fourth grade. Early intervention is just so important. And so act kindergarten, first grade, like those are the years you want to really get the help that you need if you notice that your child is not progressing at the rate that you would like them to. And just know that you're a good parent. All these parents out here listening, parenting is very hard, and your job is to love your child and be their advocate, and so you're doing a great job.
Yes. And it's all worth it. All of the hard work and the struggle and making sure you're advocating for your child and working with them at home. We know that it's hard, especially
It's
after a
hard.
long day. It's all going to pay off.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, please tell everyone where they can find you online and connect with you because I know after listening to this episode, they're definitely going to want to.
Okay, so Instagram is where you'll find me the most. It's at Little Literacy Nook. And then I also have a website, littleliteracynook.com. And then you can find the Teach Me to Read book on Amazon.
Awesome. I will link to all of that below in the show notes. Thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.